The humid August heat in Miami made my dress blues stick to my skin as I sat in the third row of St. Patrick's Cathedral, watching my son Marcus walk down the aisle with Rebecca, his fiancée of 4 years. Tears gathered in my eyes, not just from the emotion of seeing my only child get married, but from the sharp pain I'd been carrying for the past 8 months since Marcus began treating me like a stranger in his own life after 35 years as a single father. The tension had started when Rebecca began planning their wedding with her mother, systematically excluding me from every important decision while relegating me to the role of just another guest at my own son's celebration. For 32 years, I had been both mother and father to Marcus after his mother died in a car accident when he was just 3 years old, leaving me to raise him alone on a police officer's salary while working double shifts to give him every opportunity possible. If this story is touching your heart, please comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel because we truly help families going through difficult situations like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of overcoming adversity. What Marcus and Rebecca didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had received a call that would change everything forever. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a specialist in corporate law and estate planning, had contacted me about a legal investigation that had taken years to complete. Apparently, my late father, who had died when Marcus was 10, had been quietly accumulating shares in a technology startup that had grown into a major corporation over the past 25 years, shares that were now worth $47 million and had been left to me in a will that had been tied up in probate disputes for decades. During all these years of financial struggle, working overtime shifts as a detective with the Miami-Dade Police Department and taking security jobs on weekends to pay for Marcus's private school tuition and college expenses, this fortune had been waiting for me without my knowledge. The irony was both bitter and sweet. I finally had the resources I had always dreamed of providing for my family, but my son was treating me like I was a burden in his new life with Rebecca and her wealthy family. The wedding was taking place in one of Miami's most elegant churches in Coral Gables, a neighborhood where Rebecca had grown up surrounded by luxuries I could never afford to give Marcus during his childhood in our modest home in Kendall. Her family belonged to that privileged social class of Miami, owners of a successful real estate development company that had allowed them to live without financial worries, while I counted every dollar to make ends meet on a civil servant's salary. Rebecca had insisted that I wear a conservative outfit and sit in the third row, not the first as traditionally corresponds to the father of the groom. Her argument was that her grandparents, who had financed a large part of the ceremony, needed to be closer to the altar. The humiliation had been constant during the months of preparation, from small exclusions to subtle comments about my economic and social status compared to their family's established wealth. The religious ceremony proceeded without incidents, with Father Rodriguez blessing the union while I fought against the knot in my throat seeing Marcus so in love and apparently oblivious to the pain his distancing was causing me. His mother would have been so proud to see our son become a successful lawyer, working for a prestigious firm and building his own family, fulfilling all the dreams we had discussed during those difficult nights after her diagnosis and death. The afternoon weather was typical of August in South Florida, with threatening storm clouds and that characteristic humidity that makes clothes stick to your body. The reception would be held at the exclusive Biltmore Hotel, a luxury venue in Coral Gables where Rebecca had insisted on celebrating, despite the cost representing the equivalent of 3 years of my police pension income. During the drive to the hotel, I traveled alone in my 10-year-old sedan while Rebecca's family moved in a convoy of luxury SUVs. The economic difference was evident in every detail, from the quality of their designer outfits to the naturalness with which they handled expenses that for me represented important financial decisions requiring weeks of consideration before making. Upon arriving at the hotel, the decoration was spectacular. Imported white roses and orchids, a marble dance floor, tables dressed with fine linen, and a panoramic view of the Miami skyline that took your breath away. Everything had been paid for by Rebecca's parents, who didn't miss any opportunity to subtly remind me of my inferior economic position through seemingly innocent comments about the sacrifice that including all family members represented in such an expensive celebration. Rebecca's mother, Mrs. Victoria Hartwell, had organized the table distribution by placing me at table number 9, alongside distant cousins and casual acquaintances, while she occupied the main table next to the newlyweds and closest family members. The exclusion was deliberate and painful, especially considering that I was the only direct family Marcus had. the person who had dedicated his entire life to raising and educating him without anyone's help. During dinner, I listened to fragments of conversations about real estate investments, trips to Europe, and business projects that constantly reminded me of the economic gap that existed between our families. Rebecca's guests spoke naturally about figures that represented fortunes to me, while I smiled politely and tried not to feel out of place in my own role as father of the groom. The most painful moment came during the toasts, when Mrs. Hartwell took the microphone to give an emotional speech about how Rebecca had chosen well in finding Marcus, but specifically mentioning that she hoped my son would be capable of maintaining the lifestyle his daughter was accustomed to without needing external help. The hint was clear and humiliating, insinuating that I represented a potential economic burden for the new couple. Marcus, who had drunk more champagne than usual, stood up to respond to his mother-in-law's toast with words that pierced my heart like daggers. He spoke about his gratitude toward Rebecca's family for accepting him despite his humble origins, and mentioned that he hoped to be able to become completely independent from any responsibility toward the past to build a prosperous future with his wife. His words were received with enthusiastic applause from Rebecca's family. The humiliation was complete when Marcus added that he hoped everyone could understand that his new life required certain adjustments in his previous family relationships, and that he expected everyone's understanding to make those necessary changes. The look he directed at me while pronouncing these words made it clear that he was referring specifically to minimizing my presence in his future life. Sitting at my relegated table, surrounded by strangers who conversed about topics that were foreign to me, I made a decision I had been considering for weeks. I discreetly took out my phone and sent a text message to Attorney Walsh. Proceed with the complete transfer. I want the money to be available tomorrow morning in the account we discussed. The inheritance of $47 million would finally be officially mine. Traditional jazz music filled the ballroom while couples danced and celebrated, but I felt like a spectator in my own son's life. The live band played "What a Wonderful World" in honor of the newlyweds, and I watched Marcus dance happily with Rebecca, completely oblivious to the pain he had caused me with his words and distant attitude during the last months of preparation for this celebration. I decided to leave the reception early, discreetly saying goodbye to the few acquaintances at my table and avoiding the drama of interrupting the celebrations with my departure. Marcus was so absorbed in his new in-laws that he didn't even notice when I briefly approached to give him a kiss on the cheek and whisper that I hoped he would be very happy in his marriage. Upon arriving at my small house in Kendall, I sat in my modest living room with a cup of coffee and reflected on the years of sacrifice that had led to this moment. I remembered the nights working double shifts at the police station to pay for Marcus's tuition, the weekends working private security to afford his uniforms and school materials, the vacations we never took because every dollar was important for his education and future. The following morning brought both the emotional hangover from the wedding and the bank confirmation that the inheritance had been successfully transferred to my account. $47 million appeared in my bank statement as a tangible reminder that my father had thought about our future even in his final years, establishing those investments that finally reached my hands after 3 decades of legal complications. During the following weeks, Marcus and Rebecca left for their honeymoon in Italy, a trip financed by her parents and extensively documented on social media where they appeared in elegant restaurants, luxury hotels, and exclusive tourist destinations. The photographs they shared showed a life of abundance that dramatically contrasted with the austerity in which we had lived during his childhood and adolescence. While they enjoyed their honeymoon, I made important decisions about my new financial future. I hired an investment advisor recommended by Attorney Walsh, and we began working on a diversified portfolio that would allow me to live comfortably while generating passive income. I also explored real estate investment opportunities in emerging areas of Miami, thinking about properties that could generate long-term rental income. One of my first purchases was a waterfront condo in Key Biscayne, not far from where Rebecca's family lived, but I chose a discreet building that wouldn't attract unnecessary attention. I wanted financial security without ostentation, preferring to maintain a low profile while adapting to this new financial reality that still seems surreal after decades of constant economic limitations. I also decided to make some investments in my personal well-being that I had postponed for years due to budgetary restrictions. I joined a quality gym, updated my wardrobe with elegant but discreet pieces, and scheduled the medical checkups I had been postponing for economic reasons. It was time to take care of myself after decades dedicated exclusively to caring for others and serving the community as a police officer. Marcus's return from his honeymoon brought a cold and distant phone call where he informed me that he and Rebecca had made the decision to establish clear boundaries in our family interactions. He explained that they would visit only on very specific special occasions, and that he expected me to understand their need to focus on their new family without external interference that could cause tension in their marriage. The phone conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, and Marcus seemed to be reading from a prepared script, probably elaborated together with Rebecca during their Italian vacation. He informed me that they had bought a house in Pinecrest, an exclusive residential development in South Miami, thanks to a loan that her parents had granted them to establish themselves as an independent couple. 2 months after the wedding, my life had changed completely, but not in the way I had expected when I dreamed about my son's marriage. I had financial security for the first time in my adult life, but I had effectively lost the close relationship with Marcus that had been the center of my existence for more than 3 decades. The personal transformation I experienced during this period was profound and unexpected. After decades dedicated exclusively to being a father, police officer, and provider, I finally had time and resources to rediscover who I was as an independent individual. I enrolled in photography classes, a hobby I had abandoned in college when Marcus was born, and discovered that I retained both the skill and passion for artistic expression. I also began to travel modestly but meaningfully, visiting places within the United States that I had always wanted to see but could never afford. Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, destinations I had seen in magazines, but that had remained as unreachable dreams during my years as a single father with limited resources. 6 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from Marcus. His voice sounded different, less confident, and he asked if we could meet to talk about some important things. There was something in his tone that suggested this wasn't a simple social visit, but that something had changed in his life that required my attention or possibly my help. We met at a cafe in Coconut Grove, neutral and comfortable for both of us. Marcus arrived punctually but looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that I hadn't noticed in the social media photographs I had seen during the previous months. He had lost weight, and his usual confidence seemed to have diminished considerably since the last time we had been together in person. The conversation began with uncomfortable apologies about his behavior during the wedding and the subsequent months. Marcus admitted that he had allowed himself to be influenced by social pressure and the expectations of Rebecca's family, trying to fit into a world that wasn't really his, but that he believed was necessary for his happiness and marital success. Tears began to flow from his eyes when he described how he had felt lost in his new life. He told me about the financial problems that had arisen when the house loan turned out to be more expensive than they had initially calculated. The monthly payments, combined with the lifestyle Rebecca expected to maintain, had created constant financial pressure that was affecting their marriage and his emotional well-being. He had realized that he had traded his authenticity for an image he couldn't sustain economically. Rebecca had begun making disparaging comments about his humble origins every time financial difficulties arose, constantly reminding him that her family had invested in their marriage and expected certain results. The dynamic had become toxic, with Rebecca using her parents' financial support as a tool of emotional control in the relationship. Marcus confessed that he had tried to obtain additional loans to maintain the lifestyle Rebecca demanded, but that he had realized he was entering a spiral of debt that could ruin his financial future. The pressure to maintain appearances had begun to significantly affect his job performance and mental health. While listening to my son describe his difficulties, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pain from seeing him suffer, satisfaction that he finally recognized the value of our relationship, and an unexpected opportunity to repair the damage we had suffered as a family. But I also recognized that this was an important lesson Marcus needed to learn about authenticity and real values in life. I offered him my unconditional emotional support, but was clear that any practical help would depend on genuine changes in his attitude toward our relationship and toward the values that had been important in our family during all the years of struggle. I didn't mention the inheritance yet, wanting to make sure his repentance was genuine and not motivated by desperate economic needs. During the following weeks, Marcus began visiting me regularly, initially to vent about his marital problems, but gradually rediscovering the comfort and unconditional support that had characterized our relationship before his marriage. We talked about mistakes, forgiveness, and the importance of maintaining authenticity in all relationships, including marriage. Rebecca didn't approve of these visits and had begun creating conflicts every time Marcus mentioned having spent time with me. The tension in their marriage intensified when Marcus began questioning some of the excessive expenses she considered necessary to maintain their social status among their friends in Coral Gables and Pinecrest. The crisis came when Rebecca gave him an ultimatum: choose between maintaining a close relationship with me or preserving their marriage. She argued that my negative influence was making Marcus question the financial and social decisions they had made together, and that it was necessary to completely cut any emotional dependence toward his father so their marriage could prosper. Marcus called me that night, crying on the phone while telling me about Rebecca's ultimatum and his confusion about what decision to make. It was evident that he had matured considerably during the months of pressure and stress, and that he was finally beginning to evaluate his life based on his own values instead of the external expectations he had been trying to fulfill. It was at that moment when I decided to reveal the truth about the inheritance. I explained the entire situation: my father's investment portfolio, the years it had remained unclaimed, the legal process that had resulted in the transfer of $47 million to my name. Marcus was in complete shock, unable to initially process the magnitude of what I was telling him. The revelation completely changed his perspective on the economic dynamics that had been controlling his life during the past year. He realized that I had the resources to compete with Rebecca's family financially, but had chosen not to do so to allow him to learn important lessons about character, values, and authenticity in relationships. He also understood that his behavior during the wedding and subsequent months had been especially painful, considering that I had been dealing with this new financial reality while being treated as an economic burden by his new in-laws. The irony of the situation was evident. He had been rejecting the only person in his life who truly had the financial capacity to support him without conditions or manipulations. Marcus made a brave but necessary decision. He confronted Rebecca about the ultimatum and explained that he wasn't willing to cut the relationship with his father as a condition to continue their marriage. He also communicated his intention to reevaluate their lifestyle and reduce unnecessary expenses to live within their real means, regardless of her social expectations. Rebecca's reaction was predictable but devastating. She escalated the conflict by involving her parents, who threatened to withdraw their financial support if Marcus didn't control his new attitude and return to the behavior he had shown during the first months of marriage. The economic manipulation that had been subtle during their courtship became explicit and aggressive. Marcus's marriage officially ended 6 months later, when Rebecca decided she couldn't deal with a husband who didn't share her social and economic priorities. The divorce process was relatively simple, considering they had been married for less than a year and had no children, although Marcus lost the house they had bought together along with the money he had invested in the down payment. During this difficult period, I was the constant emotional support Marcus needed to process the end of his marriage and reevaluate his life priorities. We used part of the inheritance to ensure he had adequate legal representation during the divorce, and also to help him establish himself in a modest but comfortable apartment in an area of the city that better suited his real values. The experience had been painful but educational for both of us. Marcus learned valuable lessons about authenticity, the importance of maintaining solid family relationships, and the dangers of trying to live a life that doesn't reflect real personal values. I learned about the importance of forgiveness, patience, and allowing important people in our lives to make mistakes and learn from them. 6 months after the divorce, Marcus and I had rebuilt our relationship on a stronger and more mature foundation. He had developed a new appreciation for the sacrifices I had made during his childhood and adolescence, and I had found a balance between being a supportive father and maintaining healthy boundaries that protected my own emotional well-being. Together, we decided how to use the inheritance responsibly and meaningfully. We established an educational fund to help low-income students obtain higher education, honoring the memory of my father and the values that had been important in our family. We also invested in rental properties that would provide stable long-term income. Marcus returned to work with a new perspective on success and happiness, focusing on building a solid career based on his own merits and values instead of trying to impress others or maintain expensive appearances. His relationship with money became healthier and more realistic, understanding that financial security was important but shouldn't control the most important life decisions. 2 years after the wedding that had marked the lowest point of our relationship, Marcus met Sarah, an elementary school teacher who shared his values about family, authenticity, and the importance of genuine relationships over social appearances. Their courtship developed naturally and without pressure, based on real compatibility rather than superficial impressions or economic considerations. When Marcus introduced me to Sarah, it was immediately evident that this relationship was fundamentally different from what he had with Rebecca. Sarah treated me with genuine respect and warmth, showing real interest in getting to know me as a person and understanding the history that Marcus and I had shared during all the years before she came into our lives. Marcus's second wedding, celebrated 3 years after the disaster with Rebecca, was an intimate and authentic celebration in the garden of our new home, with a local jazz trio, homemade food prepared by family and friends, and an atmosphere of genuine joy that dramatically contrasted with the cold ostentation of the first ceremony. Sarah had insisted that I occupy the place of honor as father of the groom. During his speech at the reception, Marcus spoke publicly about the lessons he had learned about true love, the importance of family, and the value of maintaining relationships based on mutual respect and unconditional support. He specifically mentioned the sacrifice and wisdom of his father, who had demonstrated that true love sometimes requires patience and forgiveness even when it hurts deeply. Our family's story had become one of redemption and growth, demonstrating that even the deepest wounds can heal when genuine love exists and the willingness to learn from mistakes. My father would have been proud to see how his son had matured through difficulties and had finally found a life partner who valued real qualities instead of superficial ones. Today, 5 years after that painful wedding where I was relegated to being just another guest, I have a beautiful relationship with Marcus and Sarah, and I'm a grandfather to 2 precious grandchildren who fill my life with joy and purpose. My father's inheritance gave us financial security, but the lessons learned during the difficult years gave us something much more valuable: a deep understanding of unconditional love and the importance of staying true to our most important values regardless of external pressures. Material wealth had come into our lives, but the emotional and family wealth we had rebuilt after almost losing it was the true treasure we had gained from this entire experience. We had learned that true love transcends economic and social differences, and that the most valuable relationships are those that survive the most difficult tests and emerge stronger on the other side. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to comment below and let us know where you are watching from, as well as your thoughts on family dynamics like this. Every perspective matters, because stories like these remind us that while families may face struggles, challenges, and even heartbreak, there is always an opportunity for healing, connection, and growth. By sharing your own reflections, you not only add to the conversation but also create a ripple effect of encouragement for others who may be experiencing something similar. When you engage, whether it's through commenting, liking, or subscribing, you are helping us build a space where families can feel less alone and more supported. Many people silently carry burdens within their homes, and often just hearing that someone else understands can provide an enormous sense of relief and hope. This channel is more than a platform for stories. It's a community where resilience, compassion, and solidarity take center stage. Your support allows us to continue creating and sharing content that uplifts, inspires, and shines a light on the very real challenges that families go through. We believe that even in the most difficult circumstances, there are lessons to be learned and strength to be found. And together, by engaging with these stories, we can remind one another that no family has to navigate their journey in isolation. So please, if this message resonates with you, don't hesitate to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you're not just supporting us. You're standing with countless families around the world who find courage and comfort in knowing that they are part of a wider circle of understanding and care. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for helping us continue to share these powerful stories of resilience and hope.